Hello.
Hey, greetings.
Nice to have a live lecture.
Well, hopefully, we'll sort of see how it goes. It's mostly just a Q&A and see how everything's going for you guys. Here, let me fix my camera. That'll be better. So, so how's the week been?
It was nice, interesting. Thing we learned a lot already. And we had some interesting discussions.
Good. That's the idea, at least.
Yeah.
So presumably, anyway, I'll give a little bit of just background and announcements for for some folks. Um, Presumably, you've all gotten yourselves subscribed to CDRH email lists. If not, I will send out some links to CDRH new for any new news items that are related to CDRH. So people can do the weekly discussions based on some of that information. I included that link in this week's discussion post. I updated it to include that link as well as another topic for potential discussion. The other thing is, if you haven't already, I know at least the people on the call have already signed up for Orca One. If that's something that's of interest, please please do send me an email and let me know so that I can share your information. And we'll get that going in the next a week or so. So I'll send the first tranche of emails over to them here later today or tomorrow to start getting all that set up, and then I'll send more sets of emails as more people might have interest. We'll be doing something in week 3. I think more related to this. And then next week we've got another a supplemental video with with an extra prompt. So anyway, there are a couple opportunities to get some extra credit or replace some of the discussions that maybe didn't go as well as we go through the course. So trying to give you guys a little bit of opportunity to engage in some other topics, but mostly we'll be talking about hopefully what's happening new and sort of recently at FDA. So give you a little bit of history and give you a little bit of background and give you some more general information, but also try to keep up to date a little bit about what in the world's happening at FDA. We might talk a little bit about LDTs and things like that during the weekly office hours. So I'm out in the redwoods, so forgive any sound and issues I might have out here. But yeah, looks like for now we've just got how do you go by Ollie? It's Olympiada.
Yeah, only for short, usually.
Ollie or
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so thanks for joining. We'll see if any of the other students join us. Any questions that you had or any topics that you wanted to get into? I mean, you've got a captive office hours at the moment if you want it. I don't know.
Um, Nothing in particular. For example, I was saying that maybe we'll touch upon this later. AI is a field that I feel also that the FDI are trying to adjust with, and they're not super clear guidelines. Or yeah, it's a field that for medical devices that include AI, that is a challenge.
Yeah, so FDA has put out several white papers or other sort of write-ups. There's some information here. You can see there's a March 15, 2024 update here on the FDA. And I think there should be a link here on this site even to the list. So there's a purpose framework that FDA put out back in 2019 around AI. FDA links to a couple other published items. There was a plan, some good machine learning practice for medical device development as well that they put out. They put out a draft guidance, and they've been working on some things for predetermined change control plans for a while now. We'll kind of see how some of that develops, and that the idea there is that enough to be able to propose sort of what your development process is going to look like and what testing you're going to do to demonstrate that you're still in compliance. And so you would not have to go back to FDA with a new submission because they already would have agreed with your predetermined change control plan. But I think in many cases it's more fraught to do that. And I know some companies I've worked with who have tried or who have wanted to do that. And I think in general, it'll delay your first submission. So I generally think of a PCCP as something which is useful after you've gotten your first, let's say 510K clearance, or probably after you've gotten your initial approval for a PMA, and then you come in with a supplement that includes a predetermined change control plan where you're already implementing new changes and you're proposing how to address further plan changes, because otherwise you sort of delay your initial approval, I think, at least practically. And that for most companies means that you're delaying getting to revenue. If you've already got revenue, from a non-medical device kind of source, you're either under enforcement discretion or your primary software functions aren't a medical device and you're making sufficient revenue there, it might make sense to do a predetermined change control plan like right out of the gate, because what you're doing for medical devices is just supplemental. But generally, if you haven't gotten to revenue yet, you don't want to be doing a predetermined change control plan right out of the gate, because you're just further delaying how long it takes you to get user feedback and engagement on the current, sort of iteration, of your product. So anyway, that's sort of my high level thoughts about that. But here, I think this was maybe the link to the list. Yeah. So FDA has also put out a list, and they updated this in May. You can see here, they updated this in May of 2024 with a number of additional decisions. So they say here there are 151 devices with a final decision date between August 1st, 2023 and March 31st of 2024. 40 are devices from previous periods identified through further refinement to generate that list. So they identified 191 new devices. Of those, 151 are actually new since August 1st, 2023. And then they added a bunch of older devices as well that they believe are AI and ML enabled medical devices. So it gives you a sense that, you know, FDA has been trying to wrap their heads around this, and it's a little bit of, or it has been at least a little bit of a moving target, you know, for them to you know, sort out. And here you can see some of the more recent, you know, decisions. A lot of these are 510Ks. Here, let's keep going down. You know, a whole host of products. You can actually, is this the list that you can? Yeah. So the way I like to navigate this list, and when I've done it with the previous list, I haven't had to go back since this most recent update. I haven't played around with with the changes here, but you can download it as an Excel file or an XML or a CSV. It's a lot more you know, easy to navigate and to search. You know, you can do some search here, but I would advise you, if you've got anything that you're working on that's AI ML, it's really helpful to download the list. You can do a little bit, you know, more of a um, user-friendly search as opposed to using the search box here. But, you know, let's do a little bit of a search just on the FDA, you know, website. And I don't know, is there a specific area in AI ML that you're interested in, Ollie? I don't know. Give me a topic of interest.
Okay. Is there? Yeah, let's go with radiology.
Okay, that's a pretty big category. Narrow it down
Treatment
to
plan.
treatment plan.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay.
So actually, that's not bad. So we've got one from 2020 here that is actually named. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't others. They're just named different things. But so, like, you know, right here. So now we can figure out. Okay, so this is gonna fall under IYE. So then the next set, you know, the next you know, approach here is to say, okay, let's search for IYE. I might have
Well,
to
this means that
reset it.
it has
So here, let
already
me.
been approved in 2020. That's
Yeah, so this one was. So it looks like this one in particular. Yeah, so if we're searching by product code, this is the only IYE product code that was here, let me move some of this so I can get over here. So this is the one device that sort of fits into that broader category, maybe, as of right now. Cleared in 2020. And we can see here. So then you can get over here. And this is a little bit of a preview of some of what we'll go through this next week. And also in week 4 is finding information, you know, about medical devices.
yeah.
And here we can, you know, so we can pull up the, you know, the, I'm going to pull up the classification product code, pull up the subsequent product code, and also then we'll jump over to the summary. So here you can see, this is from Varian Medical Systems. You can see a little bit of information about, you know, who that got sent over to. Here, let me see. Okay. So you can see the indications for use here. I don't know if the background noise is coming through, but it's pretty loud over here. So we've got the indications for use here. just at a high level, useful for managing and monitoring treatment plans and generating and modifying radiation therapy treatment plans. Is connected with a system. Let me see. If I search, find. Let me see if I can find. So let's just scan it and see, because I'm not seeing anything right out of the gate that tells me a whole lot of useful information about how this is AI ML in nature. But it must have been included in the submission itself somewhere about using AI ML in some capacity. So anyway, there's not a whole lot in this summary that's particularly useful for us. So we can go over and look at the classification here. So this is, where we see, this falls under 892.50. You can see how it's described. The classification is class 2, which is typically 510K required. In this instance, there are some accessories that are described as exempt from pre-market notification procedures. And then we can come over here and we can look at the product code. This is the primary product code that they identified. And for this, if we scroll down a little bit, we'll be able to see everything here. There are a number of recognized consensus standards, and we could go and we could look at each of those and pull that up. We also see a cross-link back to the classification or regulation number that we saw back, just a second ago. And then here's a secondary product code as well. And there are some, additional recognized consensus standards listed here. I don't know if that list is fully overlapping or not. It looks like there are a few less here, but there might be some that aren't on the other list. And generally what you'll see anymore, the additional product codes should fall under the same regulation number. So every once in a while, historically, FDA has added product codes to a 510K, for instance, that might have crossed over into other regulation numbers. Generally, at least in the more modern era, you shouldn't find anything like that. You'll find all of the product codes will fall under the same regulation number, and that but you'll come across some things every once in a while where the secondary product code, I think FDA at one point when I was still there was working on cleaning some of that up, but there might still be some vestigial sort of cross regulation number product codes. certain types of products. But anyway, so generally what you'll see is that it's the same regulation number, and then you get a secondary product code. And usually what this means is that you've got two sets of indications, maybe two sets of technology. In this case, there's so for instance, if we look at MUJ versus IYE, this falls under the broader, categorization of accelerator, linear, medical, medical charged particle radiation therapy system, right? Whereas it's under the same medical charged particle radiation system regulation, but this is for the planning of the radiation therapy treatment. So it's both the delivery of treatment as well as the planning of treatment, and those could be separate products, but in this case they're integrated into one 510K, which is where we get these multiple product codes usually. Sometimes you could have the same device. It might be a crossover of indication. Usually there's a technology difference as well between the different product codes, or some requirements there. But for instance, you could have a we talked a little bit about dialysis this week. If you were looking at the supplemental information, there are product codes for nocturnal home hemodialysis, and that is a different product code than the product code for your normal sort of regular dialysis treatments. So you could have multiple product codes for different indications, and oftentimes they're like I said, there are also technological differences there. So way down a rabbit hole, Ollie, but I don't know. Hopefully some of that was useful.
But if there are two products that are integrated, then they can be included in the same 510K.
In the same 510K. In fact, you can have products where you're making the same change and you submit one 510K for the changes across multiple devices. This it's like submission bundling is what this is called. It's more common for for PMAs to have that kind of a bundling, but you'll see it for different types of submission. For anything like that, you need to coordinate with your reviewing group, and they'll talk with the program staff for whatever the submission type is that we're talking about how to go about that. But yes, I mean, you can, for a system at least, you can have one 510K that covers multiple products within that, or so there are a number of scenarios. This is one example where you've got like a software and sort of a physical product that's delivering therapy. And then you might have scenarios where you have different software functions that are both being reviewed together, or you could have different physical devices. So oftentimes, again, back to some dialysis examples, there are machines which fall under their own product code, and then there are dialyzers and tubing sets which fall under other product codes. And so you might have a system that includes the treatment set, the dialyzer, and the and the machine all in one, and there are changes happening to the system. But occasionally you might have changes only to the tubing set, or you might have changes only to the dialyzer, or changes only to the machine. So you can sometimes get one 510K that includes all of those subcomponents, and sometimes you can get a 510K that's just one of those three sort of aspects of an overall system.
How about products that are similar in a way? For example, two different versions of the same product. Do you think they can be included in one 510K?
That gets a little bit more challenging. It depends. If you're making the same changes across those, devices. So let's say that you have a home hemodialysis product, and it's also, maybe you have a separate product, like two versions of the product, that one is used in center, maybe in an acute care setting in an ICU, and one is your, more chronic care use product, or maybe it's a home use device, and you're making some changes across those products that are similar. Again, this is back where you're possibly in a bundling scenario. What I generally advise clients, though, in those kinds of scenarios, in some cases it might make sense, but oftentimes you want to submit separate, 510Ks for those, because you can oftentimes cause some confusion and some headaches for yourself if you're not careful in how you manage that. But it's sort of a case by case question for how you want to proceed. But yeah, that there are scenarios like that.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for being on. It's a lot more interactive. Otherwise, it's just like, me driving a driving a one-way conversation. So anyway, let me see. Trying to think if there's something else that I really wanted to hit on, during today's office hours. I think we've fairly well gone through most of it. But I'll be on for another 34 minutes or so, and we'll figure out something to talk through here. So let me think. In terms of regulatory strategy, so this is one of the things that we're going to start getting into a little bit more in this next week, is just how you want to be thinking about regulatory strategy. Some of the reasons that you need it. The supplemental material is really good in this next week. I think it helps give you a framework for how to think about interactions with FDA. And I'll give you some high level perspectives of mine just around, there are the stated purposes of regulation, and then there are either unintended consequences or sort of what becomes the actual reason for regulation over time. So there have been a number of potential safety issues or things like this which have led to the rise of further regulation around medical devices, just in general around medical products. Thalidomide, a drug, was a big, sort of point of, concern, and is something that FDA has pointed to as, sort of justification for, a lot of the current regulatory, paradigm that's set up around review of products. It's really hard to know if in fact the overall regulatory paradigm that we have set up has done more to help, or if it's done more to hurt overall public health. So the case is going to be made that FDA prevents bad products from making their way to market, and they do that. The flip side of that is, though, FDA also delays good products from getting into the hands of doctors and people who need them. And so you can point very easily to the the issues that are caused when you don't have regulation, or when something slips through the cracks. And this is what FDA is really sensitive about, is trying to not allow a product onto the market that will cause harm. But what FDA pays some lip service to, but does a lot less work in facilitating, is getting high quality products quickly into the hands of people, because you have to jump through all of these same regulatory hoops, and a lot of that you would want a company to be doing anyway. Don't get me wrong, like and there's a lot of cynicism, I think, about the level of evidence and data that a company is going to collect if we don't have this sort of elaborate regulatory structure set up. In my interactions with most companies, though, the problem is we see. All right. So, as I was saying before being cut off, I don't know, I think I lost signal out here. Anyway, so when you think about the regulatory paradigms and structures that we have set up, it's generally a little bit more straightforward to be able to identify the situations in which a product was allowed on the market and then it caused harm. And so that sets up a series of incentives for FDA and for regulators in general to prevent products from making their way to market. And what you miss when you're looking at it in that kind of a manner is that you miss the scenarios in which products which could have made it to market faster, having adequate testing, etc., get delayed in making their way to market simply because of the bureaucratic structure that we have set up. And fundamentally, what our current regulatory paradigm does a better job of than actually preventing harm or advancing the public health, which is the stated purpose for why we have a lot of this regulation set up. What most of this regulation actually does is protect large incumbent companies. So that's both the medical device companies themselves and their suppliers. So the way that we have regulation set up, it's very difficult to change the supplier of materials for your product. And so their interests in terms of, various supply contracts, et cetera, existing suppliers are somewhat protected in our current regulatory paradigm, as are large medical device interests who are already established and existing. And what I spend most of my time doing is helping small companies, small businesses navigate those sort of bureaucratic systems that we've set up. Oh, there we go. I'm back. So anyway, sorry to have lost you there. So how's everything going?
Good, yeah, all right.
So did you catch the anyway, that at some point my internet appears to be slightly unstable up here, so we'll see if we can fix that in future office hours. But I was just commenting a little bit about sort of regulatory capture and sort of overall structures for how our regulatory paradigm is set up and who it's set up to sort of benefit in terms of incumbent interests, both for the suppliers of large medical device companies and large medical sort of pharmaceutical companies, as well as for those large, sort of, let's say, medical device companies in the case of, medical devices, and large pharmaceutical companies, in the case of, sort of biopharma. But, and so that'll resonate a little bit, hopefully, with some of the supplemental materials. But I'll say, having spent the last several years working with small medical device companies, helping them navigate bureaucracy, is very much a situation that we see in medical devices, and Bill Gurley will comment a little bit about about that in terms of what he goes through in that supplemental video if you get a chance to watch it. And there'll be a discussion topic around that, some of the other things that we've seen. So hopefully that's good. Recognize that's an extra topic. So there's a weekly discussion, and then there's a supplemental discussion topic. So there are actually two discussion topics for this coming week. They're a little bit staggered in terms of when things are due, and it carries into the following week. But hopefully that'll be good. The other thing that I think is worth is worth highlighting a little bit here, is just that when a regulatory paradigm, any kind of regulatory paradigm, gets set up, it's generally with the best of intentions. But oftentimes, as you move along, it's useful to reassess whether you're actually achieving the intended results with the paradigm and with the systems that are set up. And that's sort of like a broader context kind of a question, and not necessarily as relevant to what any of us is going to do on a day-to-day basis. But it's useful nonetheless, I think, from a framing standpoint, for those of us who find ourselves in regulatory careers, to think about the unintended consequences of the decisions that we make. And it's also interesting because oftentimes the decision that's in the best interest of the company that you're working for, or in the best interest of your particular project, is not necessarily in the best interest of sort of the overall landscape within this like narrow product area even. So oftentimes FDA will ask for various information that may or may not be even relevant, and oftentimes it's easier to just give FDA the information that they're asking for, rather than to fight the necessity of providing that information. And what that leads to is a little bit of regulatory creep in terms of, or bureaucracy creep in terms of sort of a ratcheting up of the level of requirements needed. And some of those requirements in some case aren't even scientifically justified necessarily. On the flip side there, FDA does have a lot of visibility across products, and so in many cases they see an issue that has come up, and then they mandate that the companies that haven't seen that issue are looking into it and dealing with it. So you can get both of those scenarios, one where FDA really is asking for more information than is needed, but you can also get scenarios that I've seen where FDA is asking for information based on things that they have actually seen be an issue, be a hazard, and it's perfectly justified to be asking for more information in some of those scenarios, or getting a company to think about those kinds of hazards. And I do think that it brings up interesting questions, because a lot of this information FDA can't necessarily disclose, and so you find yourself on the company side of things in an interesting place where FDA is requiring you to do certain tests. They're not necessarily even really telling you why. They're giving you some justification for that, but oftentimes the reason that they're asking you for that additional information, or I shouldn't say often, but in many cases maybe the reason they're asking for that additional information is because they've actually seen that sorts of that sort of thing be an issue, or they've seen this specific type of testing fail in interesting and unexpected ways. and they're trying to ensure that you know, that you're not having those same kinds of issues. I mean, one example here is maybe around like 3D printing. Depending on what your orientation is for how you do your 3D print, you might have, you know, sort of, you know, and this is like, I think basic science when you think about just how a lot of 3D printing is done. You might have weaknesses in different, you know, ways where, you know, so just because you've 3D printed it using the same 3D printer, the orientation in which you printed it, oh, back again. So I don't know how much of that you caught, but um, you know, anyway, it's there. There are some interesting, you know, considerations. You know, some of which are valid, and some I can say having, you know, been on both sides of the fence. You know, I've seen FDA while at FDA asking for things that, you know, I was arguing against internally as being, you know, not scientifically, you know, sort of necessary. And, you know, also seen that from the, you know, from the company side of things where FDA is asking for you know, some things that are you know, quite arduous without a real you know, necessity. But anyway, any final, you know, things you wanted to cover in the last couple of minutes that we've got? And apologies for the technical challenges that we've had here with some of this.
No problem. Um, yeah, it's difficult in general to capture the level of detail that FDA requires and how to balance between giving them sufficient detail, but not maybe not disclosing everything, like to the smallest detail, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, and in general, you know, my advice to most companies is to, you know, put if it's not going to cost you, like if you've already done the testing, generally to provide, you know, more details on that, you know, to FDA. You know, there are some, you know, some notable exceptions there, but you know, if you've already done the testing, you know, extracting that and presenting it in a way that's sort of comprehensive, you know, can be really useful. um you know, the you know, the other challenge is just in terms of, you know, going and collecting all of that data and doing the testing. And I also advise most companies to push back when it's reasonable to do so, and you'll sort of see, you know, whether FDA is amenable to that or not. Oftentimes FDA overall is amenable, like they're open to a justification for doing things in a different way. And so if you have a different way of doing things that you think is going to be, you know, it's going to get you the same information that FDA is looking for, or you know, you have some other justification for why that's a better way to go about thinking about the problem or providing what it is FDA is looking for, you know, it's perfectly reasonable to have those discussions. And you know, if anything, you know, I think a lot of companies are a little bit hesitant to have some of those conversations, and I think it can be really useful and informative for FDA, because the way you want to think about FDA review staff is they are oftentimes experts in narrow areas, as with anything, um, but they're oftentimes reviewing a set of products that are broader than their narrow expertise, and they don't spend time as experts, you know, sort of, or as generalists. They don't necessarily spend a whole lot of time in each expertise area, right? So they may even be an expert over here. It's possible that they're reviewing a product that you've submitted, which is over here in this other category within this broader general field, and they may or may not be familiar or as familiar with this, with the nuances of what it is that you're dealing with. And so, you know, being able to present information effectively to a lay scientist is the way to think about it. Um, you know, uh, or a lay engineer, somebody who is technically you know, competent, hopefully scientifically competent, but may have a different subspecial viewed in this particular device submission. So thinking about it that way is helpful. And then you want to like fill in the gaps for anything that FDA might not be aware of, because they might. I mean, I've had conversations with FDA recently where they're not up on sort of current science in the specific area in question, because they're reviewing a whole broad category of products, and so walking through current state of the art in this really narrow scientific field was really helpful, and also walking through like current clinical practice was helpful, because FDA isn't always aware of even like the most up-to-date clinical practice. They might have a medical medically trained person, an MD, a nurse, who's familiar with sort of this broad category of products, but they may not have even, ever, done anything with this narrower, set of products in question. And so, it's helpful to get them up to speed on current scientific, sort of state of the art, as well as current clinical practice and these kinds of things. So think about that when you're, sort of packaging the submission and getting that, into FDA. And anything in particular, I mean, anything in particular that would be helpful for you in the in the near term, or anything that you've seen, Ollie, that you think deserves a little bit more discussion and conversation?
Um, yeah, I'm looking forward for the next module, the regulatory assessment. I think that is a topic which requires a lot of attention.
Yeah. And there's a very simple example that I provide, as we get into some of the projects and things that are happening later in the semester. Please don't hesitate to to reach out if if you've got some question about a more complicated kind of a question related to what you want to pull into a pre-submission, for instance, or anything like that, or trying to get your sort of wrap your mind around a particular topic area. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of freedom as we get into this device description and indication for use project. The idea is that each of these projects and assignments, I guess I should say, that we do over the course of the 10 weeks, that each of them kind of build on each other. So that's the idea generally. But if for some reason you find yourself in a scenario where you want to pivot and you don't like the the path that you're going down, we can explore that. But the idea is that you're going to pick a sort of a product area. You're going to put together a description, a device description, and an indications for use. Then what you're going to do is you're going to package this up into a pre-submission. We're going to use the pre-star template that FDA has. So, give you a little bit of background in using that. Then we're going to put together a small mock-up investigational device exemption package, and then we'll follow on with a 510K package, as a final project. And so you'll have a chance to have developed each of these, sort of pieces, and work with some templates, and have a better feel, hopefully, for doing some of these kinds of submissions, to FDA. And that'll hopefully be useful for you just in a very practical way for any projects that you end up working on personally in the in the near future.
That sounds great.
Well, thank you for attendance. I know there was at least one other person I saw on. I don't know if there was some weird wonky technical stuff where um, maybe that person just wasn't able to see most of the rest of the meeting. I'm not sure, but um, anyway, we'll get some of this cleaned up as we move forward. I'll have better signal this next week for office hours, and that should help as well, where I'm not jumping on and off because I'm getting kicked out of the internet. But anyway, uh, I hope it's been a great week. Enjoy your weekend, and if you haven't done the last couple discussion posts that you need to on other people's posts, please do that. I think we're probably good in terms of discussion posts at the moment, but make sure you keep up on top of that. The deadline for that is the end of the weekend. So look forward to chatting with you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.